Hello and welcome to Season 2 of our First Baptist Church on Fifth podcast. Last season, we heard a number of conversations from our church's members who all answered the same 5 questions about their faith and doubt, about community and hope. This season, we're focusing on the 100th anniversary of our church house. We've been nestled right here on 5th Street in Winston-Salem for 100 years. And oh, if these walls could talk. Our conversations this season will tell a bit about our sacred space, its history, what it means to us, how we use the space and are sent from it. But our conversations will also broaden to the experience of sacred space in general, how we find home in sacred spaces, what sacred space means to communities and neighborhoods and cities, what formation happens, and how then we live. Join us this season for the First Baptist Church on Fifth podcast. And thank you for listening. Hello, and welcome back to our First Baptist Church on Fifth podcast. I'm Emily Hull-McGee. I'm one of our pastors, and so delighted to join our friend, our church historian, brilliant storyteller of our church's life, Paul McCraw. Paul, we're so glad that you're back. We are picking back up where we left off, now in episode 6. And right when we finished episode 5, we had heard about the latter end of the 1930s, under the pastoring of Dr. Herring. And we are picking back up right around 1941, 1942. And I'd love for you to just kind of reorient us. What's happening in the church's life at that time?
Well, when Dr. Herring came, his big concern was twofold. Mm-hmm. The church's debt and budget issues.
Okay, right.
And sending people to the mission field in the East Asia, Japan, China,
right,
especially where he had been brought up until he was came back to the United States to go to school. Mm-hmm. And so in 1941, in August of that year, just shortly before the bombing of Pearl Harbor, he set upon a plan that felt was absolutely necessary to remodel the church. And so for 2 years, from August 41 to August 43, they worked on redoing this church. Ironically, it only cost $24,000, which was a lot more than that today. But the biggest thing they needed to do was the problem they had had since the church was opened, and the only real serious concern in the construction was leakage.
Wow.
From the dome.
From the dome. Mm-hmm.
And so they redid part of the dome.
Okay.
And covered a total of 60 leakages.
Oh my gosh.
60.
Wow. Had it just been a little too open before? Is that, or did the wear and tear over time? Okay.
But it started with the fact that the area around the dome had not been sealed as well as it should have been.
Sure.
But there were leakages in other areas of the building.
Okay.
The dome was the big issue.
Sure.
They installed a new heating system. The big thing was this beautiful sanctuary, it's mostly as it is now, was beginning to need some work. The leakages on some of the parts of the building inside. And so what happened is they repainted the church stark white.
In this room?
This room.
Okay, so
everything in this room.
So if you're watching
totally
right now,
white.
if you're watching and you know what this space looks like, just imagine. I'm looking around trying to imagine what that would, how different that would feel.
It remained that color for over 20 years, and we'll later talk about how that was brought back to its original.
Wow.
But it was an economic move as well as to try to cover up some of the damage done by the leakage.
Okay.
And so that cost $24,000. You still had a debt, so this increased the debt.
Right.
They worked on this for the 2 years, and Dr. Wilcox, who was or David Wilcox, I'm not sure he had a doctorate, I'm sorry, but he had been the associate pastor, and that was one of his projects. And so he had announced that when that ended in August of 43, that he would retire, which he did. And sadly, in his retirement, down the street from the church, lived only an additional 3 months.
Wow.
So that was a sad aspect of it. So in 43, more debt. And so in the meantime, they had been working on ways to find money to end the debt. Ironically, it happened somewhat simultaneously, and the debt was soon paid off. It happened because Mr. D. Rich's second wife had passed away, and they read his will, and he left quite a large amount in his will for the church.
Wow.
And a young man who had just inherited money, as he was being called to go into service, gave an anonymous gift. But he told me later that it was all right to tell everybody, because most everybody knew anyway. It was Dr. Brown's grandson, Henry Brown Stokes.
Yeah.
And later, of course, his brother, who was head of Reynolds Tobacco, became a big leader in the church. And even Mr. Stokes, Henry Brown Stokes, came back here and served a short time after he retired from other pastorates.
Right.
In the capacity of visitation here. So that happened simultaneously. And a few other things they worked on. And they were discussing one Sunday, they just, before service, that they had all these people who promised all this money, and they rather humorously, I guess you'd say, as they were discussing it, they said, this gentleman has promised that he will leave in his will, and we haven't seen him lately. He's been sick and all of that. And in the middle of the discussion, he walked in the front door of the church as if to say, not yet.
I'm still here, right.
But that amount of money then did eventually go.
Wow.
And from August to December, they made enough money in 1943 that on December the 26th, a Sunday, they paid off the entire debt.
Oh, my goodness.
So
wow. And that's 1943.
1943.
December 26th of 1943.
All of the debt was taken care of.
So in less than 20 years after building this space and needing to renovate because of leaks, it was completely paid for.
That's right.
Wow.
And
that's
the other
incredible.
miracle was when they set up the budget for the next year, it was increased by $10,000 from $75,000 to $85,000 as their budget.
Wow.
And the records say boldly that was the largest budget of any church of any denomination in North Carolina.
Wow. That's quite a stat. I'm curious how they knew all that, but that's, wow.
Well,
that's wonderful.
I'm sure they knew from the Baptists.
Oh, sure.
They knew about others.
Sure.
But that is in the church record that it was the largest.
Okay.
So they started out with a bang after getting rid of the debt.
Yeah.
And
so I wonder, Paul, so tell me, we're still a couple of years away from the end of the war. But as you might describe the latter part of the 40s, the church has obviously built this space, endured a depression and all that came with that, had a new pastor come in, a longtime pastor retire, brought on associate pastors, ended the year in 1943 with no debt, increased their budget. So tell me about like that decade between, say, 1943 and 53, or 45 and 55.
Yes.
Like what did those 10 years look like?
In spite of the fact the war was going on, and we had, according to the church record, 400 members who had been
Wow.
drafted.
Is that right?
Or chose to serve
Wow.
in the war. And in the narthex, they kept a
Yes.
big plaque that
Yes.
showed the names
Right.
of who had served in the war. And some of those were women,
Wow.
a few,
Right.
who served in the Army and the Navy. But when the war was over in 1946, the church had just celebrated its 75th year. And it was amazing in that they all dressed up as they would have at some point in the past with overalls and all that kind of thing. And Dr. Herring seemed to be the only one who didn't. But in the picture we have of that time period, and it was quite a big celebration because the church was doing pretty good
Yeah, sure.
at that time. And so that was amazing.
Wow.
And then in 46, the Baptist State Convention met in Greensboro
Okay.
and voted to move Wake Forest College
Yes.
to Winston-Salem.
Okay.
So the church had to do something about that and
Right.
getting ready. And so in the next year, they began a Sunday school out on Renolda, not far from the proposed campus at Crystal Lake. And then by 49, that became College Park Baptist Church, which was to serve the campus.
Sure.
And looking ahead a bit, the college came in 56. The groundbreaker was the then Baptist president, Harry Truman. They had planned to have a big meal here at First Baptist. I think it did not get as big as they had hoped. But just to tell the truth, they sort of made a mistake. And they got a pastor. The first pastor at College Park was even probably as conservative or more so than Dr. Herring. And many of the professors have told me, as I was looking into the history, of why they brought their church with them from Old Wake Forest, was there was not a single liberal church in Winston-Salem, Baptist in Winston-Salem.
Wow.
Now, College Park began to make some changes soon after that.
Okay.
And I knew the second pastor
Okay.
quite well.
Yeah.
And so, but because of that, we lost members
Okay.
to College Park
Sure.
before that, and we
Sure.
lost members to Wake Forest on
Okay.
campus.
Okay.
And so that was a big...
Yeah. And would these have been, so you say we lost members, would they have assumed their role is as planters of these new churches? Would they have
Well,
felt
at College Park, yes.
Yes,
And
yes.
they had already started First Baptist in Stanleyville,
Okay.
which had been coming to some of the Baptist churches in
Okay.
the city.
Okay.
And so they had done that. And then later, of course, we'll talk about in a minute. But
Okay.
so then when the college came, many of the people here felt, including the Davis family that owned Piedmont Airlines, they moved to Wake Forest from here,
Okay. Okay.
and several other families, but it wasn't huge numbers, as you might have expected. So then in 1949, Forsyth County celebrated its 100th anniversary. And this church served as the meeting place for the celebration.
Wow. Huh.
And the rally point, somewhat interesting, was at the then courthouse on the square, and Dr. Herron spoke in front of the Confederate monument, which was still standing on Court Square.
Wow.
And a large group of people. And a large number of people came here. Now, one record says, and it probably was not totally, it might have been a bit of an exaggeration, that this was the first public meeting that had as large a number of blacks to meet with whites ever held in Winston. There had been other meetings, I'm sure, but it was, and they evidently completely filled up this space, which was still almost 2,000 seats.
Wow.
To celebrate that.
Wow.
And of course, Winston was not formed until 2 years later.
Sure.
But, that became a big event in 49. Now, by that time, the church needed to expand. It had already bought at different times 2 houses that sat immediately behind the current church, one facing Spruce and one facing Poplar.
Right.
And they were being used as Sunday school.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Buildings.
Okay.
One was for the adults and one was for the youth.
Just in the houses?
In the houses.
Okay.
And in 1954, the church voted to remove the one on Poplar Street and replace it by a permanent brick Sunday school building.
Okay.
And then later, they did the same with the one on
Spruce, right, sure.
Which did not get completed until 1961, which we'll talk about a bit later. So the church was increasing in membership.
Yes.
And Dr. Herron was considered to be one of the most outstanding pastors in the entire Southern Baptist Convention, of which he was very active in, as well as the local state convention and the one of the national Baptist organizations. And he would go to places like Brazil and speak, and he was very active in Baptist work. And so as he aged and as the new people were coming to the church, most of them were moving to the west side of the city, the young people, many of whom had children, began to want to have a newer church there. And so they started effort to build one that became Knollwood Baptist in 1957. And during that time, many of those younger families left with their children. And in 2 different Sundays in the same month, I believe it was, we lost over 400 members to Knollwood.
Who went and planted it.
And planted.
There you go. So that would have been let's see if I'm counting right, the 4th or 5th church that First Baptist started?
No, even more than that.
More than that, okay.
Oh, yeah. By then it was over 10.
Wow. What a witness in the city it's hard to imagine that now, just given the shape of life, but...
It began with Dr. Brown, and he was a beekeeper, so he called it swarming.
Yes,
and he wanted a new church eventually in every quadrant of the city, plus one in Salem. And so after the merger, you had one in Southside, East Winston, Brown Memorial, which had been under other names before, and North Winston. And then there were other churches that were organized later, and even later than the 50s.
Yeah. One thing that is always a helpful piece of context for me as a pastor in 2025, who pastors a congregation which has people that look back on this era and the era that followed as sort of the golden age of the church. You think about so many Protestant churches around our country as the baby boomer era approached, most of these families, many of them, came to church. And so in many ways, when you look at the long arc of a church's story, the 1950s and 60s were sort of a blip on the radar rather than setting this new norm for how people in a city engage with their local churches. But I would imagine out of that abundance, that's how these churches got started. I mean, in some ways, churches like ours, it would be hard to imagine peeling off 400 people to go and start another church because, we don't have 400 people that would just leave this place and would leave a core group standing
even
here.
The percentage of the current church that would have been like 400 then. It would have been a different thing. And so the era after World War II became, in spite of the Korean War, in spite of the rise of communism in China in 1949 and all of the things in Russia, we had a fairly progressive period there. And in the 50s, it wouldn't be necessarily like the 20s, but it was in some ways in that people came to church in large numbers. And, in the South, especially, and if you were a newcomer, you always were asked, "What church do you want to go to?"
Right.
And so it was sort of expected that everybody was that, and it was probably the heyday.
Yes.
I think it sort of came to a halt. I can't remember. I'm not sure I remember the exact words, but Southern Baptists had something like 1 million more in 1964.
Wow, right,
and then things after that began to take a different turn. But
well, not only, this makes me think, not only were folks, just flooding into churches, the church occupied this very singular role, culturally, especially in the South. But the building became sort of this hub, a community hub of activity. Back in those years, there wasn't, a Planet Fitness on every corner and multiple coffee shops and, different places to go. The church really was this communal hub of activity for both fellowship and worship and study, which I think leads us into a conversation about these two buildings that the church decided they felt called to add, this education building in 1954 and another in 1961. So tell us about those buildings and how they came to be.
I think one of the fascinating things that sort of motivated it was when so many young people with young children took their membership to Knollwood and perhaps even other churches. And so lay leadership, primarily Mr. Egbert Davis, wanted to build a building that would have some recreational meetings for young people. And so they began to work on building a second addition on the back.
Yes.
That would be a place for classrooms as well as a chapel on the main level and a gymnasium with a bar. They claimed it was the only bar in the Baptist church. Of course, it only sold colas.
There you go. Candy bars.
Right. I think at one time even hamburgers.
Oh, my goodness.
It had also a place set aside for basketball and other activities on a smaller scale. They had planned to put a bowling alley in it, and it turned out to be too expensive.
Okay.
And there was a long area where you had nice meetings as a result of that.
Yes.
But there were tables to play billiards and various and sundry other things.
Yeah.
And it was the first church that anyone knew of in North Carolina to open to have a full-time minister of his title was Youth and Recreation.
Wow.
And they had a young man for a while, and then later Marshall Price came and stayed for 28 and a half years. In that position later, he was the leader for the senior adults as he himself got aged a bit.
Sure.
And so it became an unusual thing that, ironically, the pastor himself was not in favor of. And then they did another issue. Of course, Dr. Herring was so very much interested in foreign missions and to a lesser degree state missions. And some of the same laity decided that we needed to have local missions, and we began probably the first urban ministry in the state. And the Wright family gave money for that, as well as for the chapel. And we opened what is now Crisis Control, but was then called Patterson Avenue Mission. And prior to that, it had been called 9th or 10th Avenue or something. And we had a missions pastor, and he did not stay as long as maybe they would have liked for him to do. And the new missions pastor was the longtime person, Ronald Rice, who served as missions pastor here. And then in 1973, some 17 or 18 years after he came, he became the full-time director of what we call Crisis Control.
Yes.
In 73. So that was sort of an unusual move for the church because it was urban ministry.
Yeah, sure. And that came under the direction of a new pastor, a young whippersnapper that came in 1962. I wonder if you would tell us his name, but don't tell us too much else because we'll pause and pick up the story after that. Who would that pastor have been?
Well, what had happened is the laity wanted a new pastor and negotiated a situation for Dr. Herring to retire with certain amenities. And he went on to be head of the well, I'm not sure. I'll have to look that up. For a while. And so they looked for someone who would be open to doing what the laity already had been doing. And after a first no, later a second yes came along with a young man who was 31 years old and certainly a young whippersnapper. And he was an associate pastor at Broadway Baptist in Fort Worth, which
Texas,
was the church for people who went to Southwestern Seminary. And his hesitation was that he had not finished the work, classwork for his doctorate. He had, by the second time they invited him, finished that, and all he lacked was his doctorate dissertation, doctoral dissertation, and he finished that after he came here.
Wow.
And he came on, his first sermon was on November the 11th, 62.
Wow.
And he stayed until 74, I believe.
And your first Sunday was when?
That Sunday.
There you
go. I was glad to be here. I had... humorously, I had been brought up in a fairly conservative church where 75% or more were related to me either on my mother or father's side, and my great-grandfather on my mother's side had founded the church and was its first pastor back in the 1890s. So I had come here and become a friend with a young man who went to a Baptist church here that was much harder to accept. And I had sworn I would never be a Baptist again. I'd never join it. But I had visited several churches, and then a person who lived in the same apartment building I lived in walking distance of the church, invited me to come that Sunday, and it fit. So.
And you heard that young pastor named Randall Lawley.
Randall Lawley.
And that
He was
started
from Alabama.
Yep, and it started a whole new era in the church's life.
And his wife was a Methodist.
Yes.
And he had gone to Troy State, among other places, and they had lost their basketball coach, and he became the interim basketball coach.
My goodness.
And their team began to win all their games. And as he said, I could have been elected mayor of Troy, Alabama.
Oh, my gosh.
And then he went on to seminary.
Wow. Well, that is a wonderful place for us to stop for today.
Talk about how that changed things.
That's right. Paul, you're such a wonderful conversation partner and storyteller. We thank you for sharing with us. Thank you to all of you who've joined us on episode 6. Come back and we'll pick up where we left off. See you next time.